For as long as I can remember, one of my favourite Formula 1 drivers has been Ronnie Peterson. I'm not entirely sure why either, as I never saw him race as I was born nearly 20 years after he died. Perhaps it was because he was a regular driver at Lotus during the John Player special years, and that is one of my favourite liveries of all time in F1. Whatever the reason, Ronnie Peterson is easily in my top 5 favourite F1 drivers of all time, and recently I watched the film Superswede, which is about his life and racing career. If you've never seen it, I can't recommend it enough, and off the back of it I wanted to make a tribute video to arguably one of the best drivers to never win an F1 World Championship. The first car we are going to be driving up the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb course is the 1971 March 711. Ronnie was given the opportunity to drive in Formula 1 in 1970 by Colin Crabb, who ran a March 701 that season. Ronnie soon impressed Max Mosley at the factory March team and was hired for the 1971 season. At the Monaco Grand Prix, the third race of the season, Ronnie finished second, which he repeated 3 more times in Great Britain, Italy and Canada. Ronnie would end up second in the Drivers' Championship behind Jackie Stewart. His teammates at March wouldn't score a single point for the entirety of the season. Not bad for your first full season in F1. The March 711 was nicknamed the T-Tray after its unconventional front wing design. I personally think that this car has an unusual prettiness to it and is a prime example of how different each car was in the 1970s. It was powered by either a Ford DFV engine or an Alfa Romeo V8, which were very unsuccessful. We are going to drive the DFV powered car as that is what Ronnie competed in at most of the Grand Prix that year. It produced around 440 brake horsepower and only weighed 550 kilograms, so it should be pretty interesting to drive. Let's see how quickly the March 711 could get up the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb. The 1971 March Ford 711 did the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb in 46.33 seconds, which puts it 40th on our leaderboard between the Aston Martin DBR9 and the Sauber C9. This was quite a nice car to drive actually. It handled quite nicely and I think it's about where it should be on our leaderboard, as it's about a second slower than F1 cars from 1975. After another year at March where he would finish only 9th in the championship, Ronnie moved to Lotus, which was under the control of genius Colin Chapman. It was well known at the time that if you wanted a quick car you drove for Lotus, but it was also common knowledge that they were also incredibly unsafe. Colin Chapman would do anything to make his cars faster, but that was the risk his drivers were willing to take to be in the quickest cars at the time. Lotus introduced the Lotus 72 in 1970, and Joachim Rindt immediately took it to win the championship that year, albeit posthumously. Each year Chapman made revisions, and by 1973 it was referred to as the Lotus 72E. Ronnie's teammate, 1972 world champion Emerson Fittipaldi, won 3 out of the first 4 races in 1973, with Ronnie retiring in 4 of the first 5 races and finishing 11th in the other. However, Ronnie quickly fell in love with the Lotus 72 and ended up winning 4 races that year, 1 more than Emerson. Jackie Stewart would win his 3rd and final championship in 1973 with the help of those retirements at the start of the season from Peterson. Peterson would finish third in the championship, just 3 points behind Emerson, who would leave Lotus at the end of the year to join McLaren. Let's see how fast this iconic Lotus is up the hill at Goodwood. The 1973 Lotus 72E did the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb in 45.6 seconds, which is exactly the same as the six-wheeled Tyrrell P34 and puts it 33rd on the leaderboard, just in front of the Ferrari 312T. I immediately noticed the difference between this car and the March 711. Whether it was because the mods were made by different people or just that the Lotus was a better car, I'm not sure, but I had more confidence to push the Lotus compared to the March. 1975 had been a tough year for Lotus. A new car had been promised to the drivers, but for various reasons it never appeared, and they were forced to drive the Lotus 72 in what would be its 6th season in Formula 1. For 1976, the Lotus 77 was introduced. Development had been rushed, and after driving it at the Brazilian Grand Prix, Peterson left Lotus and rejoined March for the rest of the season. Our next car is the Lotus 77. I'm intrigued to see if it really is that bad, so let's test it at the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb. The 1976 Lotus 77 did the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb in 47.93 seconds, which is a lot slower than the other cars in this episode. I don't know what it was about this car, but it just didn't feel right. I'm going to put it down to the quality of the mod, but I struggled to gel with the car and put in a good time. It sits 47th on our leaderboard between the McLaren F1 GTR and the Lamborghini Huracan Performante. It may just be that the car really was bad, and that Ronnie Peterson had perfect justification for wanting to leave. After leaving Lotus and rejoining March, Ronnie was given the March 761 to pilot. Their small budget showed, however, and the Formula 2 parts that were used on the car were not very reliable. Peterson retired from 10 of the 16 races that year, but was able to get March's second and final win at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. He ended up finishing 11th in the Drivers' Championship, and March finished 7th in the Constructors. It's time to test this car up the Duke of Richmond's driveway. The 1976 March 761 did the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb in 47.06 seconds, which is much quicker than the Lotus's time, considering they were both from 1976. This car felt much more predictable, particularly under braking, which meant I could brake later and get on the throttle sooner. That time puts it 44th on the leaderboard, 0.3 seconds behind the BAC Mono and half a second ahead of the Lamborghini Sesto Elemento. The next car has a special place in my heart, as it was my favourite Formula 1 car of all time. I've been wanting to drive this car at Goodwood for a while, but couldn't decide on which episode to put it in. I am, of course, talking about the 1978 Lotus 79, a ground effect car that would be Ronnie Peterson's last car in Formula 1. In 1977, Peterson left March and joined Tyrrell, becoming one of the drivers of the six-wheeled P34 that we drove a few episodes ago. Peterson surprised a lot of people when he rejoined Lotus for 1978, especially as it was written into his contract that he was number 2 and could only beat his teammate Mario Andretti if Mario retired or waved Ronnie past. Apparently, when Colin Chapman told Mario that Ronnie was going to partner up with him, he wasn't very happy and said, "I don't want another number 1 driver at the team," leading to the arguably unfair contract for that season. Despite the contract, Ronnie would regularly show his speed and be quicker than Andretti in the races. However, if one word could be used to describe Ronnie, honourable would have to be in that shortlist. He never broke his contract and would stay behind Mario despite being quicker on many occasions, taking Lotus to 4 1-2 finishes that season. Ronnie was able to win 2 Grand Prix that year at Kyalami in South Africa and the Oostenrijkring in Austria. It would be at the Italian Grand Prix in 1978, however, that would see Ronnie take his last race start in Formula 1. The race is marred in controversy, with various theories and accusations having been thrown around over the years. Ronnie started the race from the 3rd row of the grid but made a bad getaway which allowed lots of cars from behind to catch up and go 4 abreast down the main straight. Ronnie got hit by another car and ended up hitting the barrier before his car burst into flames. 8 drivers would be caught in the aftermath, with Brambilla being hit in the head by a flying wheel and being knocked unconscious. Extracted from the car by James Hunt and Clay Regazzoni, Peterson was conscious but his legs were very badly hurt. It was later found in scans at the hospital that he had 27 fractures in his legs and feet. Originally deemed as not life-threatening by the circuit medical team, Ronnie Peterson was declared dead the next morning on 11th of September 1978 after suffering from a kidney failure due to a fat embolism whilst in hospital. The Lotus 79, as I said before, was a ground effect car designed by Colin Chapman, and it completely changed the way F1 cars were designed for years to come. Ground effect technology was first used in the Lotus 78, but it was only on the 79 that it was fully utilised for the first time. In early testing in late 1977, Ronnie Peterson found the Lotus 79 to be extremely fast, however he was feeling a lot of fatigue very quickly. When analysed, it was found that the car was producing 30% more downforce than the Lotus 78, something that the designers were not expecting. After strengthening the car and making some changes, the Lotus 79 was ready to race. It proved almost unbeatable in 1978, winning 6 of the 11 races it competed in that year, 3 of which were 1-2 finishes for the team. The Lotus 79 was also used in the 1979 season and over its lifetime took 7 wins, 10 pole positions and won the last Drivers' and Constructors' Championships for Lotus. Let's see how this awesome car fares on the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb. The 1978 Lotus 79 did the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb in 44.07 seconds, which is an incredibly quick time for a Cosworth DFE powered F1 car from this period. That time puts it 27th on our leaderboard between the Ariel Atom V8 and the McLaren P1. Its closest F1 rival is the six-wheeled Williams FW08B from 1982, which is 1.1 seconds quicker, or behind you have the six-wheeled Ferrari 312 T6, which is half a second slower. I think this demonstrates the true power of ground effect, and I can't wait to see it on F1 cars again from 2022. Ronnie Peterson would finish the 1978 championship in second place, just 13 points behind Mario, despite not competing in the final two Grand Prix. Throughout his career, Peterson was considered to be one of the quickest drivers on raw speed, and sadly for him, always seemed to join teams as their fortunes were changing for the worse. In 2016, an academic research paper was published examining all of the F1 drivers from 1950 to 2014 and comparing them across various measures to work out the greatest F1 driver of all time. On that list, Ronnie was positioned 21st. It is a really interesting article, especially if you can understand the maths involved, and I highly recommend giving it a flick through if you have any interest in the history of the sport. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next time for another special episode of cars going up the Goodwood Festival of Speed hill climb. Bye bye.